Welcome back, guys. We got episode 19 of the Modern Market Podcast. It's been a minute. It's been about a month, and we're still on track. We got once a month, and I just want to make sure you guys are getting the most updated information so you can make an informed and wise decision when buying real estate. So let's get into the business. So let's start with all of California. Let's start with the for sale. So this is from September to October, and this is it's going to be very similar to our last podcast. We're going to see a for sale is up by 3.8%, sold is down by 7.3%. And then for the Tri-County area, which includes Placer County, Sacramento County, and also El Dorado County, we're looking at a for sale is up 3.7% and sold is down by 9%. As you can see, our solds, in other words, how many people are buying homes, is going on a reduction train. That's where we're working with, which is good if you're an incoming buyer. So the most relevant data, which I tend to favor here, is going to be our month-to-date data, because we pretty much have an entire month we have all of October, and then we have pretty much all of November to compare. So if we go month to date, so from the beginning of October to the 27th of October, compared to November 1st to November 27th, our for sale is down by 10.4%. I'll explain why. Also, with the sold is very much down as well. So this is the first time we've actually seen for sale gone down in a while. In other words, our listings, we have been getting a lot more. Not a lot more, I would say. We've been getting a steady increase in the amount of homes that are being listed for sale. So this is the first month we've seen that. And one of the reasons why is a lot of the folks that have been in the industry for a long time will be able to attest what I'm talking about here is we're in a seasonal market. So right now it's typically November, December, January, February are kind of known as the slower months. But the smart people I've come to realize when it comes to buyers, and I'm not saying if you don't buy in the wintertime, you're not smart, but it's very strategic to buy in the wintertime because it's the time for deals. It's time where sellers are incentivized a lot more to make deals happen, especially if it's leading up to Christmas time, especially if their plans initially were to get out of that home before Christmas so they can move into another home prior to, or maybe they have a rental setup, etc. But those figures were based off of California. So all of California in Tri-County, Sacramento, El Dorado, Sacramento County are going to be similar. For sale is down. In other words, how many listings are being put on the market is down by 13.3% in Sacramento, El Dorado, and Placer, Sacramento, and El Dorado County, 13.3%. And then sold is down by about 30%. So the trend is sold has been steadily going down. In other words, demand has been steadily slowing down. Rates have been higher. About a month ago, rates really jumped up. We were in the 8s. Now I'll talk about rates, but for generally speaking, we're about low to mid 7s for the majority of rates out there on the conventional side. So what is the big takeaway when it comes to this data? Because we talk about this every single month, and I try and be able to articulate it as best as I can so you guys can be able to digest it properly, and then you can make an informed and wise decision on your end. So all this data is simply saying that there's not a lot of buyers. The listings are slowing down because guess what? People are people. It's a lot more difficult to list a home when it's raining. It's a lot more difficult when you got Thanksgiving, you got Christmas, you got New Year's, all these yearly events that happen. There's a lot less incentive for people to list their homes because it's a process. You got to, for one, you got to start with the spring cleaning. In the wintertime, you got to clean up all your stuff. You got to get it out. And then if you need to get it staged, maybe throw away some stuff. There's a lot of prep that is needed when it comes to listing for a home. So that's why we see that traditionally happen. But there's a lot of homes that are still on the market that came from originally. There was a lot of homes that were consistently hitting the market on a consistent basis. So like for instance, from September to October, we saw for sale, in other words, how many listings have popped up, go up by 3.8%. If I'm remembering correct, in the last probably 3 to 6 months prior to this September to October data, it's been similar. It's been similar. I believe the last month before that was 7%. It's hovering in that 3 to 8% increase monthly. But this is the first month we've seen that we're actually seeing a reduction from in the actual listings that are popping up on the market. But it makes sense. So what does that mean for you if you're considering buying? Well, for one, the rate environment, it's settling. I'll get into a little bit more about that. So that's good. So we've lost a lot of volatility. So you don't have to rush. On the other hand, if you are considering being a buyer, now is a great time to do so. And the reason why is because this is the time where deals happen. I mentioned it a little bit ago. May sound a little redundant, but I'll give you an example. So working with a first-time home buyer, got her in a contract about a little over 2 weeks ago. And you can imagine that Thanksgiving started to pop into most people's brains. So there were not as many buyers. There was still a lot of competition because she was under 400,000, but it was a cute property. It was in Sacramento. But long story short is we're closing her loan and her transaction tomorrow, and she's not having to bring a dime. She's actually, the amount of credits that she received from the actual offer that we were able to negotiate for her, she's getting $5,000 back to put towards her loan balance. That's the kind of deal that can happen during this time. That is amazing. And she's happy with the payment. And like, could you imagine buying a home? The only money that she put down so far is $3,000. That was her earnest money deposit. And then you figure out at the end that, oh, I'm getting $5,100 to go back towards my loan balance. Essentially, when there's an overage, it goes back to the loan, which is amazing because it was a down payment assistance loan. So now she just opened up more equity position from a down payment assistance where otherwise she would have been a fully encumbered unless the appraisal value was far exceeding the actual loans that created the total loan amount that loan is securing on that property. Hope that made sense. But essentially, she's getting an amazing deal, and she could have theoretically didn't have to put a single dime for the earnest money deposit, but it's kind of a red flag when you don't put an earnest money deposit. But the point is that amazing deals can happen during this time because there's less people that are trying to compete with you. And we all know there's tons of people sitting on the sidelines. I can't remember her name. I know her first name's Barbara. But she's one of the sharks on Shark Tank, and I've heard her say this in many other podcasts before. I just most recently saw her one recently, and they were just talking about the fact that she's been in the business forever, especially in real estate, and she's noticed simply that there's a ton of people sitting on the sidelines, and once they see that number 5 show up, there's going to be a ton of people rushing. So the folks that are in a position where they can do it, they're going to feel very sorry when they have to compete with other people, and that's a bummer. And that's not to push; it's just the reality of the situation. So let's give you a market update on the rates. So we have conventional mid to low 7s. Most government, we're going to be in the high 6s. So rates have improved since last time, which is fantastic. It's actually in the last few weeks, it really hasn't done a whole lot anyways. So hasn't been very volatile. You haven't been having to worry about whether if you're not locked, you're not worried too much. But I always recommend, and if you're ever working with me, I'm locking immediately. If it works for you now, we're locking it so you can focus on other endeavors because frankly, a real estate transaction is stressful enough. You don't want to have to worry about what the market's doing. Lock the sucker, get it in, and let's move on because at the end of the day, as long as that payment is comfortable for you, that's all that matters. I'm sure you will corroborate. What do you care about the most if you're a buyer? what's my monthly payment and what's my cost. And that's my job to do so, to reduce both of those. Moving on, keeping things on the financing, the loan side, we got a confirmation that our conforming loan amount actually changed today officially to $766,550. So what's the significance of this conforming loan limit change? What does that mean for you? So if you're first-time home buyer in the 500,000s, it doesn't matter to you whatsoever because the conforming loan limit before was 726,200. So if you're above that, you're in the high balance or jumbo territory. So the stipulation between the two is that jumbo and high balance are going to have a little bit higher rates, and jumbo is going to require you to have a larger amount to put down in terms of how much money you have to put down. So like 10, 15, 20% down versus if you're in the conforming loan limit category, you can put as little as 3% down with conventional and keep FHA 3.5% down. FHA loan limits are different, but on the conventional side, you can still put 3% down and the rates are actually better too. Jumbo rates used to be better, but now and most recently this year, jumbo rates have actually gotten a little bit worse than conforming. So it's good for the overall consumer. And the reason why is because, for one, if this doesn't really hurt you if you've been sitting on the sidelines, they raised the loan limit because, frankly, home prices have gone up again. Because on average throughout the nation, we saw a 5.56% increase in home sale price. And so they moved that congruently to the loan amount. So they moved the loan amount by roughly 5.5% from what it was before at the 726,200. Not to bore you, this is a big deal in our loans, on our side of the things when it comes to real estate. So every time we see that increase, that just means that it's going to be giving you as the borrower more favorable terms if you're going a little bit higher on purchase price. So it's a good thing overall. Moving on, this is what I really wanted to talk about when it came to the deals. So I've done a few of these lately, and this is the time to really take advantage of it. And I've talked about it in a reel a while back, and it actually was one of my highest performing reels. I think it got like 15,000 views or something like that. Anyways, it was like people seem to really, really like it because it's a freaking awesome concept. So the concept is the temporary buy down, and it's been hot lately. So with the temporary buy down, the general premise of it is to reduce your monthly payment, your mortgage payment, by 1 or 2 or 3% for as much as 3, 2, or 1 years. So here are the different kinds. For one, you can do a 3-2-1 buy down, which is insane if you're able to negotiate it because it is quite an expensive feat for the seller, not for the buyer. A 3-2-1 buy down is, let's use the example of 7%. So on a 3-2-1, your first year, you'd be making a mortgage payment off of a 4% interest rate. Your second year, after making 12 months of payments on the 4%, you'd go up to a 5%. Your third year, you'd go up to 7%. And if you didn't refinance before that 3 years of payments you made, you go back to the market rate of 7% where you locked it at. So the beauty of this is that it's all paid by the seller. The credits are made and paid by the seller, not by the buyer. And it's actually required that it has to be coming from the seller too. So this is a huge way to create some savings. So I'll give you a real life example. So I'm working with a first time home buyer. It's been great. We're actually going to close later this week. Different than the one that we were talking about originally. Both of them have a large amount of credits. The first one was $8,000 in credits. That was meant to go towards her closing costs, which ended up yielding her money back to her. The second example, which I'm talking about right now, it was around $8,600 in credits, and the borrower was able to obtain what's called a 2-1 buy down. So a 2-1 buy down, essentially, it dropped his rate by 2% for his first year. So his first 12 months of payments, he's making payments off of a 2% lower than the market rate that we locked him at because the seller is making the difference. So, and then the second year, it goes up to 1% below the rate. So let's use the example of 7%. We locked at 7%. His first year, he's paying out a 5% interest rate. His second year, he's paying out a 6% interest rate. And if he does not refinance between that time, it goes back to a 7% interest rate. But here's the cool part about this timing is that the majority of folks, especially borrowers, have a very confident thought in the fact that rates will improve to a point where we may even hit fives in the next couple of years. So if we're able to obtain this 2-1 buy down, and let's say the rates do get to a point where they're in the fives, that would be fantastic. It's not guaranteed, but the beauty of this would be simply if you refinance before that time period is up, that remaining amount of money that was allocated to buy your payments down, that money goes back to you into your loan balance. And that's the kind of deals that are being made right now, which is incredible because everyone's concern is what their payment is. Because of course, the biggest two things is what's my payment, what's my cost. If we can negotiate some credits to either reduce our cost or reduce our payment, that's everything. And timing in this regard is very strategic because a lot of folks have come to realize that, hey, we got an election. Historically, not guaranteed, but historically, we've seen a lot of times to where rates tend to improve a little bit during that time because typically, as we know, typically the person that's in charge at that time likes to make things feel a little bit better. I don't know if you've noticed the gas prices improved a little bit after the majority of the United States caused an entire fuss over it. Long story short is there is a lot of opportunity for savings. The temporary buy down is hot right now. It is a great tool. If you can negotiate the credits, which this is the time to do it. There's a lot less people and sellers are willing to work with you a lot more. If their time frame is to close for the year, which most people are wanting to do that, they're incentivized to do so. Simple as that. So wouldn't you agree that if we could reduce your payment to a payment that you want when rates improve, and then when rates do improve, you're already in the home, and then you can refinance, sit back, drink a cola while everyone's fighting to death to try to fight for the right property that everyone else thinks is the right property. Refinancing is a lot easier. It's a lot less stressful. Buying a home is a lot more stressful. It doesn't necessarily need to be super stressful, but it's just stressful because it's a big life event. It's one of the biggest decisions and one of the biggest, and most of the time, the biggest financial event in your life. Play your life like chess, not checkers. Be strategic. Know what's moving forward. These two situations, this borrower got $8,000 and she got money back to put towards her loan balance. Other borrower here got the amount of credits to be able to reduce his payment and rate. Reduce his rate by 2% for his first year and his second year by 1%. And there's a strong likelihood chance that he's not even going to have to touch his market rate because he was able to buy when no one else was, especially even in the wintertime. It's a pretty sweet deal. So keep this in mind. Of course, we got to qualify you on the current market rate, but if we can reduce that payment shock, I'm on the side of the borrower here because I think a lot of people have been pushing on the opposite way. Like, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable for the simple fact that you need to buy a home. Again, financially and mentally, but if we can leverage your position, know that there's not as many folks out there that are fighting for the same property as you, leverage that, get what you need, reduce your payments, reduce your rate to a point where that's where you'd feel comfortable anyways when the actual market improved. And then when that market actually does improve, which is likely to be in the next few years, that would be so nice when you are just chilling, watching TV after work, and you're like, hey, Sam, how's everything going? Just moving along. We'll probably close here in the next few days, get you signed up and good to go. Because you're like, when it comes to refinancing, all you have to do is really just e-sign some documents and then you have one in-person signing at the end. All you have to do is you just talk with me the whole time. On the real estate transaction, it's two people. You got to deal with inspections. You got to deal with earnest money deposit. You got to deal with documentation on my end. You got to make sure that You're communicating with your agent. The agent's communicating to the listing agent, which the listing agent communicates to the seller. And then the seller, and then the listing agent and I, we converse. Also, I make sure that the buyer's agent, and the listing agent are informed on everything. And then it's a constant back and forth. And that it's important to have that team dynamic. But my point is it's a lot more stressful to buy than refinance. So no need to push. If you're not ready, you're not ready. My only point is that if you can and you want to, but your primary reason for not is because you see the 7 in front of an interest rate, that's not the best way to look at it, especially when we're going at the end of 2023 with what is being anticipated here in the future and what we're seeing in the world. I mean, the most folks are talking about the election. Nothing's guaranteed, but it is interesting to see that economies tend to improve a little bit during that time, which is sometimes, a lot of the time, it's a gain for us, but nothing's guaranteed. My point is that there's a lot of opportunities to get some seriously good deals. I gave you 2 real life examples, and I mean, over $8,000 in credits for 2 people. That's pretty solid. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Switching out of the mortgage things, but I think this is also part of the last segment I'm going to talk about is 2024 planning. I'm starting it. You should too. And one of those could be buying a home. Are you ready to? Can you? If you're interested, talk to someone like me. See if you even can. And if you can't, I'll tell you why. That's a form of setting up goals, but setting up goals financially, not what you think, but what you know. Because what you think may not what is the actual fact of the situation. That's a big difference. You'd be surprised how many people have come up to me, have called me and to say, Sam, I think it's kind of ridiculous, but I just want to kind of have a ballpark. I'm sure my budget's super low, and then they can qualify for something. Or on the opposite, cockiness comes into play. But the point I'm trying to make is you've got to talk with the right people. Talk to your financial planner too. I have a financial planner. Break it down on a pie chart. Break it down as a home. Like, you'll be able to qualify what you can qualify for with me. I take that over, and then you figure it out between you and your husband, you and your wife, or by yourself. See if that mortgage payment, principal, interest, tax, and insurance, and mortgage insurance, if you're a first-time home buyer putting 120% down, which most people do, is that fitting within your realistic life pie? Whether you have a dual income or individual income, you got to break down your expenses. You got to break down what is feasible for you to be able to allocate for retirement. You should focus on retirement first. General investment can go a lot of ways. I kind of lump that in the category of like certificate of deposits, like in other words, CDs in a high yielding savings account. That's good. I think that's separate than retirement. That's just general savings. That's, you know what? Let's put that in the category of the 3 to 6 months of life savings, essentially 3 to 6 months of living expenses. So run it back since I was going all over the place. Retirement, liquidity for 3 to 6 months of living. Do you have childcare, food? You got to think about all these things. If everything went to shit, how much money would you need to live on your own? Break down expenses. Talk with your CPA. If you're a business owner, that's a big deal. It's the difference between how much you make versus revenue, as you know, if you're a business owner. But you almost want to treat your personal self as a business in a sense. Is that 3 to 6 months also including a down payment? Or is that accidentally going towards your retirement? Because obviously a 401k, even more on the focus of retirement, a Roth IRA are going to be a little bit different. 401ks you can pull alone. A Roth IRA, you can go up towards of $10,000 as an individual for your down payment. But again, do you want to sip into your retirement? It's up to you. I think it's a cool tool. If you don't have anything else and real estate's a big thing and you have other investments, that's fantastic. If that's your only asset you have for your retirement, probably not the best thing to tap into. If you guys have $12,000 in a Roth IRA and you're a first-time home buyer, but you have nothing else anywhere else other than maybe a few $1,000 in a checking account, you're probably not ready to go. my point is, this is the time to start planning. This is the time, and this is something that I actually was reminded by Mr. Zach Bacon, and shout out for the subscribe, my friend, yesterday at the gym. Great guy in the real estate industry. Was definitely someone to look up to when it comes to financials, financial planning. He's a fellow bachelor as myself, as I am as well. But he is very in tune with his financials, his goals. In order to win life, you got to have your shit together. And having your shit together is having your finances together. So your 2024 planning is big on financial, but it doesn't have to all be. It's going to be a big bulk. At least it is for me. I think it's a lot easier to have money than not to have money. I think most people would agree. But have other goals. One of my other goals too is going to be self-care. I need to branch out. One of the big things, another real estate agent buddy of mine, he brought up the idea of floating, which is floating in, I believe, a very densely salted, I believe it's Epsom salt, in a pod. I've only heard good things. I'm a little nervous to do it, but I've heard it's just opens up the brain. It's very relaxing. The idea is to feel like you're almost floating in space. And that's the one thing that I need to be better about. Is I'm good at the gym. I'm good with my diet. But in terms of taking time mentally, truly unplugging for yourself, that's different. So for me, that's a big thing that I need to incorporate for my next year. So, but what is that for you? Maybe you're giving yourself too much pats on the back. Maybe you're giving yourself too much self-care. That's possible. I've seen that happen. On the opposite side, maybe you don't spend money on anything because and you don't do anything fun. I would lean probably more in that category just because I do love work and I love working towards my goals, but that's something that I need to work on. That's part of my goals. And I remember this is the first podcast, Rob. It was the New Year's resolutions. Remember that? That was the very, very first episode. But I remember we talked about, it was all about setting goals and not having it like it's this grandiose thing that happens in the beginning of the year that you only adhere to for a little bit of time because it's something special, right? So set these in place now for goals so you can adhere to them, and you can almost practice for the month of December, because especially if you're in the real estate game, you got some time. It's not as busy. It's the time to really get your stuff together for next year. Make sure your systems are in place. Make sure your people are in place. Make sure that you're in place. You're in check. Your books are looking good. You're set up with your taxes. Your P&Ls are up to date. You're up to date on your quarterlies. This is the time to do it. So I'm looking forward to the first podcast of the year because it's going to sound very similar, because I'm probably going to bring out some of the goals that I wrote in this month back to that podcast. And I'm looking forward to next year. I really am. And I hope you guys are too. And if real estate is in the mix for next year, I hope you guys keep following the podcast and reach out to your boy. You know, I'm always here to answer any questions. And if you have anything you guys want me to talk about in any other of these podcasts, anything that you're just interested, I've covered a ton on the short form, the podcast, etc. But if there's anything you feel like I have missed out on the podcast that I could easily be providing more to you guys with, put it in the comments. Shoot me a DM, whatever. I'd love to hear it, because all I want to do is be able to provide you with as much resource as possible, because so you can make an informed and wise decision when it comes to real estate. I hope you guys have a great time out in the world. Stay warm out there. It's getting cold. You can tell I kind of have a cold. Just got over one. I kind of sound like a smoker. But until the next episode, be safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.